Hi, Nick from Patchwerks here, and today I'll be talking about the Werkstatt, which is a limited edition analog synthesizer from Moog. And you may have seen this before, which is because it's been released as a kit before, and now it's released with the Werkstatt and the CV expander. And the nice thing about this is it is a very affordable way to get that Moog sound at $199, and it has a lot of very cool experiments you could do with it, because since it comes as a kit, the CV expander is actually something that you screw onto it. You put it together. It has a metal enclosure, and underneath it has the PCB with all the knobs. So putting it together isn't too hard, but allows you to get into there and look at the schematics and do some electronic experiments. But even if you don't want to do that, it sounds great. So let's check it out. All right, so to play the Werkstatt, you actually don't need any other things besides just your fingers. And even then, you could just have it drone on if you would like. But it has this tiny little keyboard down here. You got 1 octave plus C, so you have an octave that you could play with this keyboard. And what you see is what you get. We just have knobs and switches. So when I just play, you hear our pulse width being sent through that classic Moog filter. Nice and smooth, and that pulse has tons of it's like those buzzy harmonics. Pulse width modulation, you could either do it manually with your fingers, which, I mean, sounds incredible. Or you could have it using this LFO down here. So I have my LFO set as triangle. The rate's pretty moderate, and I'll switch the destination to pulse width modulation, which actually will make this knob no longer work because it's being driven by the LFO. But let's hear it. Oh, I love it. And it gives motion to that sound, and it's a very sharp analog sound. Our filter also can be either driven by our envelope generator. We have one envelope generator here with an attack decay. Right now I have it on sustain, so as long as I hold it down, we get a note, but if I turn it off, we get nice plucky notes. Some glide. Let's sustain it. Nice. And other cool things you could do with this. The VCO mod right now, we're having it target the pulse width modulation, but if we sweep the frequency, we can get some pitch wavery. That's really subtle. I like that sometimes because it kind of adds analog error, if you will. But if you turn this up, gets kind of crazy, and this LFO does go into audio rate, so you could do some cool FMing. So that's awesome, and that's even without patching anything. And in this next section, I'll show you some pretty cool creative patches that we could get. So we're gonna do a trick here with the frequency modulation. Kind of gives it a chiptune sound, but what I like to do is take my LFO, switch it to square, and then let's hear how that sounds. So you hear how it goes ba-do, 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 ba-do. Let's turn down glide. So now we're getting octaves just with this LFO being swept by that VC on the VCO mod. And this thing down here, we see it says keyboard CV out. So based on what button I press, I'm actually getting a voltage that's going high and low. High, when I play there, I think it's about 3.6 volts per octave. So you have to attenuate it if you want it to sequence external gear. But you could do cool things like take that keyboard CV out and then plug it into the LFO FM in, which will be the rate of the LFO. So let's hear that. So down there it's going to be slow, and up here it's going to be faster. Nice. So that kind of just gives you some ideas. You could have this keyboard CV sweep like the filter pitch or do some weird extra tuning stuff. I like keyboard CV out. Another trick here is to take the output of the filter and actually create a feedback loop, kind of. you take the output of the filter and you put it into the VCF CV in. So it takes that audio signal coming out and changes the frequency of the filter, which adds like harmonic texture, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. So let's dial in our sound. Turn that down. So the sound's pretty tame there, but if I take that VCF out, plug it into our VCF CV in, which is modulating that cutoff frequency, and turn up the resonance too. And let's turn that. So you could hear that, especially on the decay, you could really hear it shaking around that filter. Let me unpatch it and show you the before and after. So before and after. Sweet. All right, so we got a patch that I like, and now I actually don't want to use this little keyboard. I want to sequence it with the SQ1, and that's not actually too hard. One thing to note here, and I did this before the video, but this VCO exponential FM in is the input you want to use for your rack users. We usually just call that the 1 volt per octave input or the pitch input. This one, I had to open up the Werkstatt and tune it. Wasn't too hard. If you've tuned an oscillator before, it's a very familiar process. But other than that, I didn't really fuss around with it too much. You just need a tuner and a keyboard that gives you notes that are within that 1 volt per octave scale. So that's already set up for me. So all I need to do with my SQ1 is take my CV, go into my VCO exponential FM in, and then take my gate and go into my gate in. And just like that, we have a sequence. Yeah, it sounds great. And then one last note here too is that this VCO has a very wide range, so I actually want it a bit bassier. And as soon as we plug in our VCO exponential in, it expects a -5 to 5 volt range, so C0 will be quite a bit higher than your root note before that's patched in. So let's turn that down. And as you see here, the glide actually doesn't affect the incoming CV. That's only on the keyboard. But another cool trick here is that you could use the keyboard to kind of interrupt the sequence, you know, give it a bit of some live performance stuff going on there. Yeah, and one last trick I want to show you is actually kind of the magic of the Moog filter. It does have a VCF odd in, which is like an external in, and I'll be taking a song off my phone and running it in there. And I'll set that up here and we'll check that out. So in this setup, I have my iPhone, and I'm just using the plug key here because, you know, it's an iPhone, it doesn't have the auxiliary out. So I'm using that to get my one of the channels, and I'm running into the VCF odd in. And the reason why I'm just not playing things right now is that this part actually takes a little bit of setup. And this is part of the charm / learning part of the Werkstatt. But when I patch something into the VCF odd in, it's actually still going to be giving me the sound of my VCO. So there are a few things we got to do to make sure that we're only getting the sound from the audio source here. First trick here. So I'll have this drone on. Okay. So when it's droning on, I want to make sure that my destination isn't set to pulse width modulation because I want to manually change the pulse width modulation myself. One of the tricks to mute it, the VCO doesn't have a volume control. So if I want to mute it, one thing I can do is take that pulse width and turn it all the way up or down. So that's a really thin sound. And that sounds like nothing, but technically if you're monitoring what's coming out of here, it's giving you like a DC offset that's positive, which can, if I hit play here and have this drone on, we can't hear anything because of that. We still need to do a little bit of work here. So what I want to do is take let's check that we're still getting sound. So we still got sound. Turn my frequency all the way down. And a weird trick with this is that your VCO linear FM in is actually inverting. So if I give it a positive voltage, it actually goes down. So I could pitch the VCO down even more and give more headroom for our external input to play around with. Got low battery there, but we'll be okay. So I'll take this and I'll plug it into my SQ1 CVA. I'll take my function and let's give me 8 volts because I really want to make this as slow as possible. I'll take my A, crank it all the way up to 8, go to step jump mode, and so when I click that, now I should be getting 8 volts going into my linear FM in, and that should be giving me nothing. So when I turn this up, now we hear nothing coming through, which means that we're good. So I'm actually going to turn my pulse width all the way down, so when I hit play here, we should start. We can hear the sample coming through. It's a little bit quiet. And I think that it has something to do with some of the levels here. There is going to be some level incompatibility sometimes, but it sounded good enough for this. And now you can play around with the filter. Which is cool because now we're using that Moog ladder filter and it's almost like we're able to do a bit of remixing. I'm going to turn it up just a little bit. Because one of the things we could do is turn that down, and then I could actually still use my envelope to trigger it. Which is really cool. And then we could also do other sorts of things like apply the LFO over if we wanted to. Just things that like, oftentimes we like to use filters and other processing tools and the Werkstatt can fit that particular need. So anyway, glad that the Werkstatt's back out. Glad that we got to play around with it. And let us know if you have any questions, and we're excited to see what you will do with your Werkstatt. Thanks for watching. Again, check us out either in person at our store or email us at info@patchwerks.com. Thanks and have a great day.